Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about Chiron's retrograde at 0 degrees of Taurus, where it's going to make its way back to the final degrees of Aries one more time and for the last time. And today's discussion is to understand this backward movement of Chiron, what it's indicating, what it's trying to show us, teach us, and of course, ultimately how to move forward. And a lot of times, in order for us to progress forward in our life, we have to go back. We have to reflect back. That's the only way to have some sort of a meaningful forward movement. But before going into the depth of this video, I want to let you know about the next video coming up, which will be about the retrograde of Saturn, which actually occurred a few days ago. But this video took a bit of time to make. I really had to think through what Saturn's trying to do in this retrograde phase. And after that, we'll be talking a little bit more about Saturn, which is that trine that it will be making to the sun in the sign of Leo. And if you want to catch all of these upcoming videos, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when those videos are released. And now let's get into the story of Chiron and what it's doing with this backward motion. And I want to start here. A lot of times when we're on the ground zero of experience, we actually don't know what we're experiencing. We don't know how this particular experience fits in the totality of our life's narrative. And sometimes things feel insignificant. Like, for example, take a conversation you're having with someone you just met. And in that moment, you're just talking to another person, but that could become one of the turning points of your life. I mean, so many people that we meet and we get into a relationship with, this is how it all starts. So we all come to make these ordinary decisions, go through ordinary occurrences of life, but they're slowly changing the trajectory of our lives. They're conditioning us to become a particular kind of a person. And of course, as they're happening, they don't yet have meaning. Meaning always comes way later after the fact. And this is telling us something about the nature of consciousness as the experiencer and then as the one who has to retain these experiences and then bring them forth again to re-experience something else. So it's telling us our consciousness doesn't have this linear, straight line of understanding. We always have to return, revisit, and reinterpret things. Like the events of our lives stay the same, but when we look back, we're interpreting them in a very different way. And if you think about it, with each return, the way that we're seeing it has changed. And this retrograde of Chiron is reflecting this process, especially since it takes such a long time to go through one sign. This Chiron wants to go back into the sign of Aries to give us a different perspective. It's going to be a time about reflection of everything that Chiron had gone through into the sign of Aries, especially now that we got a little flare of how things are changing in the sign of Taurus. This Chiron wants us to finally depart from the sign of Aries with a new understanding. And the question now for the rest of our video is, well, what is this new understanding that Chiron's trying to reach, that we're trying to reach? And to understand why Chiron needs to go back into the sign of Aries, I want us to actually have a little look at what the sign of Aries indicates. And the common understanding about Aries is that it represents initiation, courage, initiative, independence, freedom. But there's something more primitive about the sign of Aries, which is a sign that's denoting the principle of emergence itself. Aries is the moment where an undifferentiated aspect of existence can come, individuate, and define itself. Aries can declare, I am, I exist. And if we take Aries and put it in the natural zodiac, which falls into the first house, and the first house pertains to the self, some of the questions that we're going to have to come and grapple with in the sign of Aries is, who am I? Not who should I become? Not what the world expects of me to be, but who am I as this individuated, differentiated self? So it's talking about something about the possession of our identity possession in general. But we have to remember, identity is not something that we just come and discover in ourselves. It's something that eventually becomes within us. It has an unfolding because we have gone through a particular kind of life. So identity formation in itself is a process, is the way that we come to identify ourselves and declare ourselves as, I am that type of a person. This is who I am. And if you think about it, we become this is who I am through 1,000 different kinds of occurrences, countless, not thousands, and countless amount of choices throughout one lifetime. Like every time that we speak, we become, whether if that speaking is coming from an honest and an authentic place, or if it's coming from a distorted place. Nevertheless, is keep reaffirming that identity. In some ways, Aries is not just about the birth of the body, this self that exists in flesh. It is the continual birth of the self over and over, reaffirming the self, this identity that it's become. Because it's acting from there, it's initiating from there. And bringing Chiron here, and Chiron representing our wounds, it's saying that something about the flow of life in these ways that Aries needs to function was disrupted. So the question for us becomes about understanding what is it that Chiron has been or was interrupting? How has it affected our becoming process, this identity formation? And this now brings us to a point where we have to briefly describe Chiron. And I'm going through this video quite fast because I've already made an extensive video about Chiron in the sign of Aries as well as in the sign of Taurus. I just want to talk about this transition in this video of going back and how we can conceptualize it and use it as a point of reflection in our life to look back and to see what all of these themes have been about. But going back to Chiron. And I want to focus on what it is that Chiron interrupts in this sign. The interruption of wounds, which is talking about something that is a pain that we carry. And things that are broken in this life, things that are wounded, they interrupt the natural flow of something. Like, for instance, having a broken bone, it interrupts a range of motion, right? We can't move properly. That wound is not allowing us to have a full expression of our natural movement. Grief is a form of a wounding. And when we are going in that grieving process, we can't go through the natural flow of life. It's like the currents are always pulling us back or down while life seems to be wanting to move forward. Or think about being betrayed. The entirety of our connective tissue to other people is contingent on this notion of trust. We have to trust ourselves, we have to trust reality, and we have to trust other people to be able to negotiate with them and to move with them. But when we've been betrayed, this trust gets interrupted. That is the wounding. Or think about places where we have tremendous amount of fear. We need to act, we need to get up, we need to engage with life that day. But that fear interrupts our action because we get into the state of paralysis. These are all the kinds of wounds that Chiron talks about, the kind of interruption that it brings to the flow of life. So when Chiron was moving through the sign of Aries, it was interrupting our becoming process, that identity formation, the way that we need to externalize ourselves, express, and initiate. It was showing us where we hesitate, where there is fear instead of courage. That freedom that the sign of Aries wants, it was showing us where we have a sense of dependency, where we feel unfree and trapped. And Chiron taking so long to go through there, it was taking us to all these places and towards all of these people where we could see that the source of these interruptions were, for instance, coming from the way that we were rejected, through criticism, through failure, humiliation. And because this is the sign of Aries, which belongs to the god of war, which is Mars, even through the ways that we were violated and experienced violence. So Chiron was showing us how there is not this natural flow. There was this wound that was redirecting life to be experienced in a different way. And because of that, our interpretations were changing. Hence, our identity formation was being affected. So in many ways, we were negotiating our existence through the hindrance that we were experiencing. Like if we reflect back now that Chiron's going back, think about the hesitations during that transit. Think about the questions that were formulating themselves as, can I really say this to this person? Do I have the courage to take the loss if I speak my truth? There were questions of, can I trust my instinct? Because when you've been tiptoeing around other people for so long, you can't trust your instinct. You're taking your cues from another person in terms of how you should act, how you should be in the world. We were even asking ourselves, do I have the right to desire this, to want this? Am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Which again goes back to that dependency part, where we need someone else to confirm our existence rather than having that sense of freedom within to declare that this is who I am. This is how I need to move or how I desire to move in the world. This Chiron, if we reflect back, it was creating questions of belonging. Like opposing the sign of Aries is the sign of Libra. And the sign of Aries likes to do things alone. And in a healthy way, Aries wants to be the first because it has so much self-trust and courage. But when it becomes dysfunctional, it's looking to the other and it's negating itself to be able to fit in. So it's almost as if we need permission from another person to become who it is that we need to become. Chiron was showing us all of these wounds as it was transiting through it. And if you have this naturally in your birth chart as a natal signature, it's showing you a lifetime of that. And I want you to take note of everything that I talked about. We're not talking about success and thriving. These are questions of survival. It's showing us the way that our confidence was fractured throughout time. That sense of integration that we needed to have had become fractured. And wherever we have wounds, there's tremendous amount of pain. So we felt this through the transits, or if this is a signature throughout a lifetime, as internal pain and suffering. And talking about suffering, the next video about Saturn's all about that, because we have Saturn there too right now, right? And this Chiron going back now from the sign of Taurus, it wants us to have a particular viewpoint about everything that we've experienced and how we've come to understand it. It wants to show us that we still have some sort of an unfinished business in the sign of Aries. It wants us to see certain things that we missed the first time in terms of seeing, understanding, and interpreting. And I want us to realize that it's retrograding to the most intense point of a sign at that threshold, because it's going from the threshold, that 0 degrees of Taurus, to 27 degrees of Aries, which are the final degrees. So we're definitely wrapping something up, but there's definitely an unfinished business there. But before going into the sign of Aries, we're going to have Chiron sitting in Taurus, stationed there in its retrograde motion. And I want us to understand what Chiron was about in the sign of Taurus, or what it's about, so we can connect it to how it needs to go back. And I want us to start with this. What does that 0 degree point of Taurus mean when Chiron's sitting there at that threshold? And the way I want us to think about this is to think of thresholds as a place of decision. Because, when an emergency happens, you're placed at a threshold. In an instant, you have to make a decision in terms of how do I decide? How do I move? What do I need to do? But the kind of decisions that come through Taurus are very different than Aries. Like Aries will ask, what do I need to bring into existence? Make it just burst out. Taurus's question is, how can I endure this? What can endure? Because Taurus is not concerned with emergence the way Aries is. It's concerned with continuity of things. That's why it's about cultivation. It's about sustaining what has already emerged in the sign of Aries. It's trying to support that. But if something has not fully emerged out of the sign of Aries, like what is Taurus going to sustain? What is it that is going to endure? The question becomes ambiguous. It becomes dysfunctional. Like imagine you're trying to sustain this house that you're living in, but the foundations are so weak that even when you walk in it, things get rearranged. What's the point? No amount of maintenance is going to maintain a house without a foundation. And this is telling us that there's some foundational understanding is still missing in the sign of Aries. And that's why Chiron cannot do his job and show us how we can heal things through the sign of Taurus, because things are unfinished in the sign of Aries. The true emergence has not happened yet. It's not complete. This is telling us before we can start concerning ourselves with sustaining the identity that came out of the sign of Aries, the I am, that component of I exist, it has to be formulated strongly enough so now we can work through it in the sign of Taurus in terms of what it means to sustain it, to cultivate it, to grow it. So this is why Chiron needs to dip back into Aries for that unfinished business. I almost imagine it's not Chiron that wants to move out of Taurus. Taurus is pushing Chiron out at 0 degrees. It's like, dude, you are not bringing anything substantial here for me to grow and cultivate. Like, what do you want me to do? We can't move towards a future. I need you to go back to the past, fix some things, come with a great foundation, and then we can start fixing things, making things better, more beautiful, more opulent. It's as if Taurus is refusing to support an identity that has not been fully formulated. And I don't want us to be worried that, oh my God, Chiron, the wounded planet, is going to move back into the sign of Aries. So I have to feel all kinds of pain and suffering anymore. I don't want us to think that way about Chiron right now. And I say that because Chiron took about 10 years to go through Aries, and then it's only going to be there for a few more months. So it can't take us through 10 years of pain and suffering in just a matter of a handful of weeks. So I don't feel that this retrograde wants us to relive the past, but it is a process of going back for reinterpretation of some of our old experiences, as I was mentioning earlier. It's almost as if Chiron wants us to go back to see our becoming process in this past 10 years. If you have it in your natal chart as a signature, for a lifetime now, for the past 50 some years. And I want you to think about the animal related to the sign of Aries, the ram. It likes to climb up cliffs, get to the highest point. So this is almost like Chiron going to the highest point of Aries, as high as it can possibly go, to have this wide scope of everything that has happened. It actually wants us to see how our consciousness expanded in the past 10 years through all the pain and suffering, all the experiences that we had to have. And seeing is a very powerful thing because it changes our perspective suddenly. It changes our understanding. And when our understanding changes about something, everything else can follow and change after that too. This viewpoint is an opportunity to have a context, a different kind of a context for all the pain, all the wounds that we've been carrying for a lifetime. And it's this context that allows us to have that quality of Aries, which is freedom, to be free from these wounds, to be free from the people and the situations that had us bound. The viewpoint of it from that top down, because it's at the end of Aries, might even allow us to see that, let's say, people who inflicted those pains, those wounds, they were themselves wounded. The bigger context can create these situations where we can forgive ourselves and we can even forgive other people, or at least we can let it go because now we understand. This is also about taking some appreciation, acknowledging how far we've come in the past 10 years. And if you're around 50 years because you had Chiron in the sign of Aries when you were born, this journey of the past 50 years, it's letting all of us to see a bigger picture right now. And by seeing that bigger picture, we're able to understand the totality of our narrative. And as I was saying earlier in the video, this is how meaning comes through. This is how we go from pain for pain's sake or suffering for suffering's sake to pain for a purpose, suffering for a purpose. And Saturn's trying to do the same thing through its retrograde, which I'll be discussing in the next video. So this retrograde of Chiron is giving us a perspective that is making us aware of certain things about our lives once and for all, especially regarding those wounds. And once when we become aware of it, we can become unaware. We understand how we've become who we become, what the value of it is, where it stems from. And once when this process is done, we have the foundation. Now we can go into the sign of Taurus, understanding where we stand, where we come from, why we turned out the way that we did. Now Taurus has something to work with. And I do want to take this moment before closing the video to talk about Chiron return. I want to actually explicitly talk about this. Those of you who were born with Chiron in the sign of Aries. And I want us to understand, unless if something happens in the world of sciences and technology where we can live past 100 years, we're going to experience our Chiron return only once. And this Chiron return was and is special because it shows us at least half of our becoming process, assuming we're going to live to 100 years. So it's talking about that child who learned how to hesitate. It takes us back to those formative adolescent years where identity formation in general is becoming solidified and seeing what was hindering it. It's showing us what kind of adult emerged from that adolescent and what kind of toolkits it had to build its life. It was going to show us the effect of our success, failure, losses, things that we abandoned ourselves in this life. Why did we do it? Why did it come up in life? This is the process we were going through. And in the past 10 years, we were constantly confronting this question of who have I become through this entire lifetime? Like, what am I? Who am I? It was almost like a midlife crisis, and it's a perfect timing for midlife crisis when we consider Chiron return. It starts pretty much right before it. And at the same time, this Chiron return wants us to see the way our becoming process was interrupted, but it also wants us to see what continued becoming. After all, we're standing here right now, right? It wants us to see what refused to disappear, what in us remained alive and continued striving despite disappointment, criticism, even violence. Chiron wants us to see that there's something very powerful beneath all of the experiences that we have and we retain. There's a quiet thread that exists within all of us that no experience in this life can interrupt. And I want you to think about the sun. The sun symbolizes this because the sun is the soul. And the sun is exalted in the sign of Aries. It's something that is part of our nature that cannot be touched. When that emergence comes into existence and now it's differentiated, there's something about it that nothing in this life can disturb it. And in many respects, we build these identities because we're actually trying to protect this thread. And I think this is another thing that Chiron was taking off the peels of it, peeling the onion so that we get to the core kernel of our truth. To understand, yes, these identities were built out of pain for self-protection, but these identities were also a mechanism to protect this inner core essence that we are. And that is valuable. That is something that we can take into the sign of Taurus. And I think this retrograde back is about seeing how we have confronted very painful subjects, people, circumstances, memories in our lives, but also that strength and courage that exists within us that is now willing to go into the sign of Taurus. And this is bringing us to the end of our video. And before closing this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you like, share, and subscribe. And please do comment. Let me know about your experiences with this Chiron. How did you experience Chiron dipping into Taurus? By seeing your wounds, what did you learn about yourself? Not just the wounds, not just how you were hurt, but what's beneath it that even the wounds couldn't come close to touch. And what do you think you need to see from that height, from the top of that cliff right now, to be able to understand all these experiences that you've had, to be able to take something valuable into the sign of Taurus? I'd love to know your experiences. And if you want a reading of this transit, the upcoming transits, or just to understand your own natal charts in terms of why have you had the experiences that you've had? How have you arrived to today? And what's possible in the future? You can book a reading with me for that. And to book, you can go to the description box of this video. My email is there. Or for more information, you can go to parisayazdi.com. And when you're ready, you can email me and I'll be here. And now to close. And I want to say this, one of the assumptions that we have in this life, and I really don't know why we have this assumption. Maybe we're socialized that way, or maybe it's just we have this linear thinking because we think in terms of linear time, but we think our development process moves through this straight linear line. We imagine ourselves moving through life, leaving our past behind us and just moving to the future. And somehow, for some strange reason, the future is always supposed to be better than the past. But if we actually pay attention to nature, even to the orbit of the planets, they're happening in cycles. Like the seasons return, the planets through their transits return, Chiron returns, memory returns. And we human beings constantly return back to places where we felt wounded. We return back to our developmental process. And I think that's because consciousness is trying to become more conscious about its own process. And our awareness deepens through reoccurrence. And every time we return back to something, we encounter a similar reality, but we encounter it with a different mind, with a different perspective than the first time that we came into that experience. And that makes all the difference. Like with Chiron, if you're having a return or through this retrograde period right now, it's telling us that we had to return back to our wounds. This was the only way to learn how to soothe it. This was the only way to accept the scars that it's left behind. And we all carry scars. And I think now going to that height is teaching us how to honor those scars. We should take them as badges of honor because they're proof of a life that's been lived. If you're 50, for example, you're experiencing the aging process of your body. Take pride in that. Just think about how much life has had to go through you, how much of yourself you had to give to life. And the proof of it is being shown on the body. Honor it. Respect it. This is what Chiron's showing us right now in these last moments. It is time for us to remember every one of these scars and wounds have a story. And that story in itself is a world. And it is that story that we're living. It's given us a sense of meaning. It's keeping us grounded in this occurrence of life. And in going back to the wounds with Chiron, This is also an opportunity for us to reflect back and to see how we kept on moving through life and how we still stand. This Chiron retrograde can be a testament to our strength, our resilience, relentless way of moving through life, and in having courage, all things that pertain to the sign of Aries. I want us to actually look at our wounds and to see that despite everything that happened in life, we permitted life to move through us. We have become the carrier of one story for life. That is strength. I want us to see that behind every disappointment, every hesitation, every violation, every fear, our becoming process never stopped. And Taurus wants a confirmation that we're still alive. And through this retrograde, we're going to confirm this for the sign of Taurus. And after that, we will return back in the sign of Taurus to understand how we can remain steady. Those are the kinds of wounds that we're going to be looking at, how we can endure, how we can cultivate, how we can grow, and ultimately how to become a fertile ground where we can create, because existence itself is in perpetual creation until existence itself comes to an end and it goes through its own death. But we are an agent within it, involved in the same reiteration process. So the sign of Taurus wants our totality, and we're going to prove it, that we are going to come in, that we have survived, that we are strong, that we can endure. And my friends, that's it for our video today. Sending you much love. Till next time.